At some point between the passing of the dinosaurs and the end of 1998, a film called Antz came out. This would be DreamWorks' first ever film and would have a pretty stacked voice cast including Sylvester Stallone. Then, 4 years later, we got Antz Extreme Racing for some reason. The game would not star Sylvester Stallone and would in fact star something that we're quite familiar with here at Worst Racing Games: pain. Welcome back to Worst Racing Games, the series where you guys suggest terrible racing games and we review them and rank them. Today, the sacred wheel of Worst Racing Games has selected Antz Extreme Racing, and oh boy, this was such a fun time. So sit back, relax, and join me as we find out if Antz Extreme Racing really is the worst racing game. So Antz Extreme Racing released across July to September of 2002 with a Game Boy Advance port following in November of that same year. The home console versions were developed by Supersonic Software, who are mostly known for the Micro Machines series. On a side note, the Game Boy Advance version was developed by Magic Pockets and differed from the home console version because that one actually reviewed well. And 1 year prior to this releasing, we got Antz Racing for the Game Boy Color, which is not related. So Extreme Racing doesn't really have a story, it has 5 different playable characters, each one with a different set of races to play. There's no real overarching plot for any of these characters, you just do the missions and move on to the next thing. So as this is Extreme Racing, this game does not just have one single type of racing, it actually has 4. So let's break these down into 4 sections, and we'll start off with the most obvious, and that is the actual kart racing. To drive, you hold the X button, to brake or handbrake turn you use the square button, and then you turn with the left analog stick. You can also use items with the bumper buttons. So the driving and handling in Extreme Racing is very reminiscent of PS1 kart races like Muppet Race Mania. It's light, loose, and all over the place, but it works pretty well. You can slide cars around tight bends, drift all over the place, so on and so forth. It just does feel very, very slippery, so you do have to get used to it, but even the AI can't seem to get used to it because they spin out quite a lot as well. A lot of the tracks are designed with tight turns in mind, and there is a bit of wonky collision detection as well, and it's very easy to spin out if you just so clip part of the track. So there is a lot of track learning and replaying till you get stuff right, which if you're into that kind of thing is great, but if you just want to put on a nice kid-friendly kart racer, then this probably isn't the game for you. Now before we go any further, if you are a fan of kart racers, or terrible kart racers in this case, then why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And if you want to be the first to hear about upcoming videos, then join my Discord server in the description below. So enough plugging the channel, let's get on with Antz. So as this is a kart racer, Antz also has a few different items you can use. There's the speed boost, which is insane, almost uncontrollable but fun. There are 2 different kinds of projectiles you can throw forwards, a green bug which doesn't lock on and a red bug that does lock on. Sound familiar? There's a shield item which protects you from projectiles from behind, which if you're in the wrong camera angle, covers the entire screen. Then when you're in first place, there's a couple of items that are the equivalent of banana peels, you just drop them on the floor and then enemies can crash into them. The items do add a lot of fun into the game, but they do also cause a fair few problems. Hitting one of your fellow racers with a projectile and then trying to pass them can be a nightmare. If you throw a projectile and hit the racer in front of you, they'll spin out and crash and completely stop you in your tracks, or just get in the way, stopping you from overtaking, and then you just have to throw another one. There's also no invincibility window at all, so you can just spam projectiles at enemies, or you can also be spammed by projectiles, so that's not ideal. And as I mentioned before, the boost is just uncontrollable, so you have to really pick and choose your moments to use it, otherwise you're just going to fly off into oblivion. So next up we have running races. That's right, the ants don't just drive, they can just sprint at the same speed of the cars, which obviously just makes so much sense. Anyway, these running races are pretty much fundamentally the same as the driving, except they just have slightly different controls. Instead of holding X to run, you just push the left analog stick forward, and X becomes jump. Everything else is pretty much the same, you still use items with the bumper buttons. For the most part, the running is pretty much fine. There are some platforming sections among some of the tracks, and they can be a bit janky because the jumps are a bit wonky and slow you down quite a lot, but they only seem to slow you down and not the AI. At the end of each character's story, there is a running section up an anthill. These can be quite painful because you're constantly running to the right as well as having to jump as well. And because of how slippery it can feel, one tiny nudge of your analog stick in the wrong direction can ruin the entire race for you. And if you do happen to knock into something, just pause the game and restart. Don't even bother trying to catch up because you won't be able to. Whilst I appreciate the attempt at variety, the running sections do just feel very, very similar to your standard kart races, because they all follow the same format anyway. Same amount of opponents, same items you can use, just slightly different tracks. However, seeing some of the Antz run is pure comedy gold, and some of them look like they're chasing down Flint Lockwood to stop him from using his latest invention. On a side note, it took me way too long to figure out how to get the boost at the start of the race, and you have to do it just as the light turns green.
I am stupid. I am stupid.
Now, if you've made it this far into the video, then make sure to comment Antz down below. So that's now 2 of the 4 styles of racing covered, so let's get on to the most painful, by far, of these 4. So for some reason, just randomly scattered throughout each character's career mode, is one single slalom mission. This basically is surfing, or sliding I guess, down a hill, constantly making sure you have to get every single checkpoint, otherwise it's a 2-second penalty, and then if you miss so many, you can't even finish the race. Now, it's definitely a major skill issue on my behalf, but these sections are hard as sh**. The controls are janky as anything, one slight nudge of the analog stick can send you flying in a direction you don't want to go in, and to try and get every single gate is pretty much impossible. It's designed with practice, practice, practice in mind, but I don't want to repeatedly play the same level, I just want to do it and move on to something more interesting. Thankfully, there's only one of these per character, but if you do like these sections, then fair enough, but they really were not for me. Don't get me wrong, when I finally beat the time and didn't really have any missed checkpoints, I was very, very satisfied, but that's only because I was getting so angry at it beforehand. So the 4th and final style of racing in Antz Extreme Racing are flying sections, which are fundamentally the most different from the 3 other styles of racing. There aren't many of these scattered throughout the levels, usually only about 1 per character, but they're kind of fun. You're still holding down X to go, but to control the height you're flying at, you have to move your character around using the analog stick. Then you gotta make sure you've got the exact right angle to make sure you're going the fastest you can possibly go. It's a little bit awkward to get used to, but once you do, these flying sections can be a lot of fun, and offer up a nice break from the other parts of the game. On top of these 4 styles of racing, there are also time trials which utilise these 4 different racing styles. Honestly, this might be some of the most fun I had with the game, purely because I could just blitz around the track and not have to worry about getting stuck behind or clipped on any of the stupid AI. So the time trials are done on 3 laps, so you have to get the fastest time across all 3 laps to win. It's a nice difference from just getting the fastest lap time and being done with it, because it means you have to be at the peak of your performance for 3 laps in a row. Or, just hope the game doesn't screw you over. So that's what Antz Extreme Racing has to offer in terms of gameplay, but how does it hold up in terms of its design? Well, visually, I think the character models for the Antz look pretty decent. They're pretty much in line with what we saw in the film, for the most part. And the world itself as you're driving around looks pretty decent. It's certainly not the worst looking PS2 racer I've ever seen, but it's definitely not the best one I've seen either. The track designs themselves range from frustrating to just really, really cool, and there seems to be no in between. So obviously, because they're all ants, you'll be driving around back gardens and stuff like that, and it looks pretty cool seeing all these plants and surroundings looking really big. There are some really cool levels, like running through a back garden with a child stomping around, or driving through a pond where there's lily pads where frogs could eat you. There are also some super generic ones that have unnecessarily tight turnings, and just look really hazy. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. The karts that you're driving around in look quite funny because they are just insects, but at the same time you can also just ride around on insects, which low-key is kind of cool. There's something really weird but quite funny to me about just riding around on a beetle or a spider as an ant, and then racing other ants also racing on these spiders. The sound design in this game is okay. Some of the karts have really irritating sounds because they're supposed to sound like the insects that you're riding on. Like a cricket just has a constant high-pitched sound as you're driving around, which gets really annoying. The characters for some reason have no voice lines whatsoever. Considering the movie had been out for 4 years at this point, I'm sure they could have just taken some voice lines from that, but no, here we are. The music in this game is actually surprisingly decent for what it is. Some of the chase themes are pretty fun. The overall theme for the game is also kind of decent as well. So to be fair, in terms of its design, this game actually holds up fairly well. So how did Antz Extreme Racing hold up in terms of its critical response? Well, on Metacritic, the PS2 version of this game, which is the version we play today, holds an abysmal 31 out of 100. The original Xbox version didn't fare much better with a 35 out of 100. The PC and Game Boy Advance versions don't have Metascores, but on game rankings, the GBA version has an 80% score, whereas the PS2 version has a 42%. The Metacritic user score for Antz on the PS2 is 6.3 out of 10, so a fair bit higher than its critical score. And to be fair, I think if I'd had this as a kid, I'd probably look back quite fondly on this as well, as a fair few of you were commenting that you actually kind of liked this game when I posted that this video was coming out. So if you were a fan of this game growing up, completely fair enough, I'm glad you are. This wasn't really for me, but I think personally I found this game really hard, especially the slalom sections. Now in terms of sales, as per VG charts, the PS2 version of Extreme Racing only sold about 40,000 copies, with the original Xbox version only selling 20,000, which brings the total of the home console versions of this game to a whopping 60,000. Which really isn't that much, but I'm not surprised because this was 4 years after the film came out. Honestly, I still don't know why this was made. So now the time has come to rank this game. So as I mentioned previously, I found this game to be quite difficult, and I didn't want that to cause any bias when it came to ranking the game. So I sat and thought about it for a while, and I thought, no, this game doesn't belong in pure evil, but it certainly isn't so bad that it's good. So Antz Extreme Racing is just rubbish. There is definitely some fun to be had here, but it is by no means a good game. And with that, we come to the end of our look at Antz Extreme Racing and this episode of Worst Racing Games. So where would you guys rank Antz Extreme Racing? Would you rank it differently? Do you like this game? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you have a game suggestion for me to add to the wheel, then let me know as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications of my future uploads. I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.